We are excited to have you here tonight at our second session for Project Empower, and it's great to see so many people joining us. We know some more will join us as we get started here. If your technology allows, we'd love to have you have your cameras on so we can see and interact with you a little bit in our presentations, and we'll have a few talk times and work blocks here. My name is David Royer. I'm at the University of Louisville, and I'm going to get us started tonight. And we've also got with us Grant Allen, who will be presenting in the second half. And we have a lot of other team members here from Stacy and Carrie and Jessica and Joni and Allison. So got a lot of people here to support and interact with you when we get to our talk times. Our session topic tonight is systematic screening. So we're going to take a look at that, and especially framed within a comprehensive integrated three-tiered model of prevention. And we invite you to connect with us. So if you're on the socials, I'm not great at the social medias, but I'm trying a little bit here and a little bit there. But if you want to tag us, we are at CI3T Model on many of these platforms, so connect with us there. We're here tonight with session 2 of this 6-session series, and these are standalone sessions, so you're welcome to come to all, come to the ones with topics that interest you. And this is part of what you see here of our professional learning plan. One of the unique features of CI3T is data-informed professional learning. So while we've got a training series going, we've got an implementation support series going, and then we've got these Project Empower sessions going where anybody and everybody is welcome to attend and learn more about CI3T. And on the bottom there, we've got what we call trainers and coaches calls, where again, anybody who's interested with CI3T can join us. Those are 1-hour Zoom sessions, and they're like PowerPoint free zones where you can connect with others who are implementing or training in the CI3T model, and ask people who are doing it versus us who are the people who are researching it, and get their insight and tips and learn from their experiences. So it's a great way to connect with other schools and districts. If you'd like to follow along and have a copy of tonight's materials, we invite you to visit ci3t.org, click on the Professional Learning tab, and then scroll down a little bit or click that Project Empower quick link. And you can open up the accordion, the second one there that says systematic screening, what do I need to know? And in that bucket, you'll find the PowerPoint for tonight, and you're welcome to follow along, as well as a few other materials. And later, in case you have some colleagues who would like to experience this and aren't able to be here tonight, within 2 weeks, we'll have tonight's video posted in that same accordion expansion. And you can go back and look at the last session that we had. So we try to get those up within 2 weeks of the session. All right, here's where we're headed tonight. Do a quick overview of the CI3T model of prevention, and then I'll do an introduction to systematic screening within CI3T models, and then turn it over to Grant, who will go into more depth about how to use those screening data to inform instruction at Tier 1, how to build low-intensity strategies and empower teachers with those, and then using those data to connect students to Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. And then we'll explore some resources and wrap us up. So we are really excited that you're here. We always love sharing information with anybody and everybody who's interested in screening, especially behavior screening. It seems to me that a lot of people are familiar with academic screening and benchmarking, and behavior screening may be new, especially at the system level where 100% of students get screened, versus some people think, oh, I'm just going to screen those that I think need to be screened, or this subpopulation of students. But no, this is systematic screening within CI3T models particularly, but applicable to all of the multi-tiered systems of supports. A little background on CI3T as we get into where the screening fits. It was started in the late 1997. In Southern California, moved to Arizona, back to Southern California, over to Tennessee, and then North Carolina, and then Kansas. And right now we think of Kansas as kind of the home base. Most of the team members you see online here are situated in Kansas. That's where I joined the team back in 2013. That's where Grant joined. Everybody's joined the team there in Kansas that we're currently working with, although we have partners all over. And you can see on the map here where we have many research studies active, or schools that have found our professional learning materials and done their own trainings and built their own models, and then they connect with us for some occasional support or just to share their successes. So it is a growing model as an expanded form of a multi-tiered system of support that I'll cover in just a moment. Here on the screen, you see a visual of the current IES funded grant that we have going on. And we are in year 5. So we're currently conducting a randomized controlled trial of our CI3T implementation support series. And we are in year 5. And this current session, this Project Empower, is part of our traditional offerings. We've done this for ever since I can remember in 2013. And I know it happened before then as well, where we support anybody who's interested in CI3T and learning more. So all faculty and staff, all educators are welcome to these sessions. And let's begin a little more in depth with our overview of systematic screening and CI3T models. So just to make sure we all have a little background in what a 3-tiered model is, and then specifically the comprehensive integrated 3-tiered model, CI3T, which is just what it says. So it's comprehensive, meaning rather than just being response to intervention, which is academics, and rather than just being PBIS for behavior, we are comprehensive of both those RTI for academics, PBIS for behavior, and a validated social skills curriculum, and it's integrated. So there's no gaps between those domains. It's one CI3T leadership team that's integrated and looks at all of the school-wide data, and then works with subcommittees like grade level teams to support students more directly. But it used to be like in some MTS models, there was an academic team and a behavior team, and they didn't always talk to each other, even when they were supporting the same students. So it wasn't as efficient. And we want to integrate across those domains. And so at Tier 1, we provide research-based, high-quality instruction to all students. And by doing so, that should be sufficient and meet the needs of 80 to 90% of our students. So we're doing our literacy curricula and our math curricula, and that includes across the domains. We got some social skills curricula that's part of that. Maybe it's a anti-bullying or character development, whatever the needs of the school are. But we're providing those instructions in academics, behavior, and social skills for all students. But we know that's not going to be successful for all students. Some are going to need more, and that's okay. We have supports for those at the second tier, so the Tier 2 or secondary model level of prevention. So we need to look at, for students, is this something that they have trouble doing, so it's a fluency issue, we just need to support them? Or is it something that they can't yet do, so we need to provide some instruction? And these may be provided in small group settings, like we might have a reading comprehension strategy, extra dosage, and this is in addition to Tier 1. So everybody's getting that high quality Tier 1 core instruction, and some need more. Usually like 5 to 10% of our students maybe need more, and 10 to 15 sometimes. And we give that to them at the first sign of concern. And we know that through systematic screening, which is where we're headed tonight. But some students, maybe 1 to 5%, need an even more intensive support level, and that's our Tier 3 supports. So we have some students who maybe need a functional assessment-based intervention, and that's more intensive. It's one-on-one, it's customized, it's individualized, and it takes more time to do all the functional behavioral assessment and design the behavior intervention plan based on that FBA. And other things like a multi-systemic therapy program, that might be considered a Tier 3 as well. When I was a high school teacher, I loved teaching. I had an intensive reading clinic, and that would be considered a Tier 3 support. It was still small group, but because I met with students 5 at a time for 100 minutes a day, that made it Tier 3. That double block of time, that intensity level, really helped students increase their reading grade equivalence at a large rate in a short amount of time, because of the 100 minutes a day. So we integrate all those across the tiers, and we make sure that we're providing all the instruction, core high quality instruction to meet the state standards, and everything that we need to meet for all of our statutes and regulations, of course. We include for behavior, positive behavior interventions and support. So we're explicitly teaching the behavioral expectations across school settings, providing opportunities for students to practice those expectations and to get reinforced for meeting those. And if they find that our attention, and maybe we use behavior specific praise or a token economy with tickets, and if that's reinforcing, then they're more likely to engage in those behaviors in the future. So I can ignore the minor behaviors and reinforce the behaviors I want to see more often. That will lead to them being successful across school settings. And then for the social domain, Schools review and choose a validated curriculum that meets their needs. So they may need character education, they may need an anti-violence or anti-bullying program, and they choose one that fits and has sufficient evidence behind it to show that if implemented as designed, it's going to lead to the desired shifts in our students' outcomes. So this is all happening at tier 1 for all students. They're all getting high quality academic instruction. They're all getting the direct explicit instruction in behavior, as well as that social skills curriculum. And at tier 1, in a CI3T model, we create a CI3T implementation manual and clearly define for everybody involved at the school, all the adults and students, what are their roles and responsibilities. So for example, for faculty and staff across, you see columns here for academics, behavior, and social skills, we're going to identify not only what is the curriculum to be used for reading and math and how many minutes a day should that be implemented, but what low intensity behavior support strategies should we be seeing to increase student academic engaged time and reduce their disruptive behavior. And I might use all 7 of these, or I might provide professional learning on one of these per month. Across the domains with behavior there, I'm going to, of course, provide the direct instruction, teaching the lesson plans for each setting for the behavior expectations, but I'm also going to have a reactive plan so that if students aren't meeting expectations, what do? There's a flow chart that I can follow, starting with a very respectful and responsible way to respond educationally to students and show empathy first, and then following steps to determine if it's an office managed behavior or a classroom managed behavior, a major or a minor. In the social skills domain, we're clearly identifying what is our social skills curriculum and at what dosage should we be implementing it. And then I need to track and make sure that that's actually occurring. So I'm monitoring the treatment integrity of the social skills curriculum. Am I following the curriculum map, just like with my academic curriculum map? Am I doing it for my social skills? And is everybody doing it across the school? So that we can say for students who are receiving all of this instruction, if it appears the data show us when we screen that they need something more, we can confidently say to families, we have provided this high quality instruction in their core academics, in behavior, and in social skills, and it appears they need something more. But I need all that treatment integrity data first. In the plan, we've got procedures for teaching the plan to all the stakeholders, procedures for reinforcing everybody who's engaging in delivering the plan, and procedures for monitoring. And that's where we're going to focus tonight when we look at our systematic screening. We also in CI3T models want to integrate our lesson planning. So we have a template that's available on our website at ci3t.org. It's currently on the COVID page. You can find it there. But as you can see here, we've got our kind of normal stuff for academic objectives and state standards that we use, but also what is our social skills objectives? What do students need to bring in from the social skills lessons we've been teaching to this lesson? And what behavior expectations are going to be needed? So I might pre-correct for those and use the language from the social skills curriculum. And where throughout this lesson can I focus on using some of those low intensity strategies? And I'm going to plan for that. What can I pre-correct for? Where can I use behavior specific praise when they meet those expectations? Where can I offer instructional choices? So visit ci3t.org on the COVID page, and you can find that templated. For any primary plan, there are some elements. You heard me mention treatment integrity. We need to monitor that. There's also social validity, and those relate to each other. We know that social validity can actually predict future implementation and treatment integrity. On our measures page on ci3t.org, you can find an infographic that covers a little bit more on treatment integrity and social validity. And we're going to look at systematic screening for behavior tonight, but the same principles apply to academics, which many people are more familiar with. Benchmarking 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring with core academics. We're going to do the same thing with behavior 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. We want to screen for students so that we know at the first sign of concern who needs more, because then we can connect them to tier 2 supports, because it's okay when tier 1 isn't working. We have a plan at tier 2 and tier 3 to support students who need more. So looking now specifically at systematic screening, give you an overview, and Grant will go more in depth. If you visit our ci3t.org page and click on screening, you can get a ton more information even than we're going to present here. We've got some guides and publications and a lot of videos that walk you through systematic screening in general, and then some videos that'll walk you through specific screeners that are available as well there. So click on that systematic screening tab and you'll learn more. Just as one example, I think there's 7 screeners that are featured there, and we feature ones that have sufficient evidence to show that they are reliable and valid. So here's one that remains free access. So this is one that a lot of schools choose to use because it's got a ton of research behind it and it's free to use. It's what you see right here, an Excel spreadsheet. And there's 12 items. This is the student risk screening scale for internalizing and externalizing. So it's got 2 subscales on it. And when you use it, just be aware that there's 2 tabs if you open it up in Excel. One's for elementary, which is what you see here, and one's for middle school, because there's slightly different cut scores as one of the items dual loads onto both of these subscales, the externalizing, which is always 7 items, and the internalizing, which either has 5 at the elementary level or 6 at the middle school and high school level because of that dual loading. So at the elementary level, you can see the cut scores here. We screen in, we rate students on those items, either 0 if it's not present, a 1, 2, or 3. And by the total for the externalizing subscale, we can see if they're at low risk for future behavior concerns, at moderate risk, or high risk. And at the middle school, high school, just slightly different cut scores there. We can see that takes a little bit more risk on the internalizing scale for it to be predictive of future concerns. When we screen 3 times a year, we can graph our data and track over time how we're doing as a school. So this is a snapshot at the school-wide level. And you can see in fall 2020, there was a increase in the low risk. So the green there is 90%. People often ask, well, I wonder what was going on there. And of course, it's COVID, and we were just returning back to school. And so we were being really explicit in our expectations and really teaching and practicing all of our procedures for being safe and distanced and cleaning. And so with that high attention, we noticed that behaviors were doing a lot better. And you can see this school in their first year, fall 2014, and the next year they weren't yet at what we would like to see at the 80%, but they were growing over time and getting closer and closer to that. And in fall 2022, you can see where they're at. And when we've got the 80% or more in the low risk category, you can see the numbers in the yellow and red boxes. Those numbers then become manageable, and we've got the resources and the staff to work with that number of students in small groups or individual at tier 2 and tier 3 supports. Versus if it wasn't at that, then there might be too many students who look like they would need tier 2 or tier 3 supports, but we'd be more efficient and effective with our resources and efforts by focusing on tier 1 first. So we want to grow our green in that sense, trying to get above 80% in our low risk category. That was the externalizing subscale, and here's an example for internalizing results. You can see the numbers similarly grow over time as schools implement CI3T and focus on their social skills instruction and really rolling out that plan and getting the dosage and the treatment integrity up high for that. That helps a lot with the internalizing results. These were an elementary example, both of these, but you can do the same thing at middle schools and high schools. And in all grade levels, you can break it down by grade level and see how we're doing. So here's a high school example, and you can see the number of students screened, and this high school is doing great. In fall 2022, in the low risk, they had over 80%. And so you can see that the numbers at the moderate and high are manageable, and the percentages are right on target for what we would expect to see in those groupings. I want to show you some additional data. These are from some research studies that validated the use of this screening scale, and there's similar studies for other screeners, and the ones that we have on our webpage to choose from all have sufficient evidence and to show that they're reliable and valid. But the power of screening can be illustrated here. So if you look at the column where it says low risk, so these are students that screened in at fall, and in the low risk category, there were 163. Approximately, or I'm sorry, that's not the numbers there. There's 468 students, but those that screened in at low risk in the fall, by the time at the end of the year was spring, for oral reading fluency, this was their average score. So you can see as they went up in risk level, their oral reading fluency score went down. And the similar pattern occurred for their measures of academic progress. Their MAP reading goes down as their behavioral risk goes up. Nurse visits increased and in-school suspensions increased, so much though that all of these had statistically significant relations from low to moderate to high, from fall to spring. So this screener takes 10-15 minutes to complete. And if you can take that amount of time as a whole school in fall and know which students who screen in at moderate or high risk are more likely to have reduced outcomes in academics and more behavioral referrals and in-school suspensions and whatnot, that's really powerful data that we can get in the fall. And this is the internalizing version in the same study. And the similar pattern exists here, with the caveat that for oral reading fluency and in-school suspensions, there was no significant difference between moderate and high risk. So it was any level of risk was predictive of that by the end of the year. So again, just that little bit of data that we get from screening in the beginning of the year, extremely powerful in predicting who's going to maybe have some challenges by the end of the year. So we can start to intervene and support them at the first sign of concern at the beginning of the year. Here's some ideal data. This is from a middle school. And from this middle school, we can see a little differently. So those were elementary in those first couple tables. Here at the middle school, similarly, but they may have different outcome measures to look at, but the same pattern. You can look at those who screened in at the fall at low, moderate, and high risk. How did they compare across office discipline referrals? If they were low risk, on average, students had 1.5 office discipline referrals. And then it jumps up a lot. If they screened in at moderate risk, they were more likely to have 5. And at high risk, 8.4. So that's huge. In-school suspensions, similarly, statistically significant. Low risk, very minimal. It goes up with moderate and high risk. GPA goes down. The number of course failures increases. This is powerful data that we can use, and it doesn't take a lot of time to gather in the fall. And then we do it again in the winter. So any changes there, we can start interventions for those students. And we do it again in the spring with 6 weeks or so remaining so that we can support students as well then for a 6 weeks intervention period. This was a middle school example. Same thing at a high school. This is a high school that Grant and I both got to work with, and they looked at their data and in their first 3 years saw right away that they were able to grow their number of students who screened in at low risk by implementing CI3T over time, while their moderate and high risk categories reduced over time in their first 3 years of implementing CI3T. And that was true for internalizing on the left as well as externalizing on the right. Now, with all these data that we collect, when we screen, we want to be sure that we are protecting the data. So these need to not be just saved on any cloud platform out there. We want to make sure these data are secure because these are our students and their names are on there and their student IDs are on there. And then we're screening them for these concerns, and we want to keep that secure. So make sure you've got a system set up to keep data secure. And we also want to share these data. If we ask our faculty and staff to take the time 3 times a year to rate all of the students in their classrooms, and to be clear, this is just teachers who rate these students, that we want to share the data back with them and let them see how are we doing as a school? What's our snapshot at each of those 3 time periods? And break it down by grade level. How are we doing at the grade level? And then each teacher can have access, of course, to their own classroom level of data. So we want to share those data securely as well. We have templates on our website that can help you share those data. This is a PowerPoint slide that you can double click on the graph and enter the percentages. And it gives you plenty of slides to share that whole school snapshot as well as the grade levels. And then by building those triangle graphs over time, you can see how you're doing comparing slides each year over year. So we compare fall to fall to fall to see how we're doing, because we know in the winter our behavior is a little different as students look forward to winter break, or at the end of the year behavior changes a little bit too. It's got these cycles throughout the year as the end of the year comes. Whereas in the beginning of the year, we're reviewing material, behaviors tends to be a little bit better. So we compare fall to fall to fall, we compare winter to winter to winter. That's why you see the different colored slides here. So I encourage you to use that if you're going to be screening. Make sure you've got systems set up to protect the data And you could have these nice, convenient graphs and tables to be able to share it, looking at it school-wide, looking at it by grade or maybe by department or classes. And then at the individual student level, when a teacher looks at their classroom of data. And again, that's available on our favorite website, ci3t.org. And if you click on that systematic screening tab, you can not only get that tablet, but look at these different screeners that are there. For the one we showed you, the SRSS-IE, there's a early childhood downward extension that you can look at, as well as the original externalizing 7 items only, the SRSS, and then a few others there. We've got protocols as well that you can use. They're templates that you can fill out to get reminders and almost like a script for when you're getting teachers set up and ready to screen for the first time or any time. Great reminders. So for example, on that screener, we want to screen across row by row, one student at a time, rather than going by column. And there's a reminder that the items on that screener in particular aren't operationally defined, but we want to fill it out, each teacher and single teacher. So even if we're co-teaching or have aides or anybody else in the classroom, just the classroom teacher completes that without consulting with anybody else. And even though there's not operational definitions for each of those anchor items, the teacher fills each one out to the best of their ability based on the knowledge that they have and the information that they have, the accurate, reliable data that they have from observation, from the file on the student that they have. So they're filling it out with those data and that information. We also have this training manual for screening coordinators, goes through for that screener, step by step, all the information that you would want to know to fully understand it and be ready to implement it and train your faculty to complete it. And just in a moment, Stacy's going to send us into some breakout rooms so we can have some time to discuss what I've presented. When we come back, Grant will go into more detail about using that systematic screening data that we get. So at this time, we're going to go into breakout rooms and look at these questions. What are some of the potential benefits that you saw to using systematic screening 3 times a year? What might be some challenges and how might you overcome those? Or what questions that you have?
So first off, I want to say thanks to David for leading us in the that first section and giving us a nice overview of CI3T and what screening kind of looks like in that system. So I'm going to hit the button there. There we go. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what are we going to do with these data. We've got really high quality information. So the question is, how do we use it to best support our students? And the first thing we'll talk a little bit about is how do we kind of inform efforts at Tier 1? So you might recall within a CI3T system, we have kind of the types of things that we do for students broken up into, Tier 1, what we do for all students, Tier 2 and Tier 3, which we do for some students and a few students based on the level of need. So what we want to think about now is how do we use screening data to inform what we do for everybody? So here's just an example of some data that you might find from a screener. This is from the Social Skills Improvement System. This is a screener that gives you a snapshot of a few different domains, actually. So this one will tell you information about like reading skills, math skills, pro-social behavior, and motivation to learn. So this is just at one time point. So after you've asked teachers to submit their ratings, those get collected by leaders in the building or district, then get kind of collated and put back out to faculty and staff to look at. And it might look something like this. So this would be a great opportunity to stop and say, okay, so how is it going? One thing that I always like to do is I like to look at the N count. So I like to look at the numbers first, because you might look down and say, okay, so we've got 489, 490 as like the number of people, number of students that have been screened. And that's pretty good if you have a building population of like 500 on the dot. But if you had a population of like 600 or 625, 489 is actually indicating a large portion of the school population is missing from the data. So one of the first things that I do when looking at data is make sure that we did we get everybody? And if we did, excellent, that's wonderful. And if we missed some folks, that's some time to reflect on our systems and say, oh, we might have missed somebody somewhere along the line. Let's kind of maybe go back and revisit our logistics and see what we might be able to do. But looking at this, theoretically, we're looking at somewhere around 80% of students being responsive to, tier 1. There is, a level of risk that's here for moderate and significant difficulties in terms of the screener. And I would say like the area of most need would be sort of the reading skills instruction. And so this is a great time to say, okay, how is reading skills instruction going at our school? What are the programs that we have available? What are the curricula that we use to teach reading skills? Are those being implemented as designed? Do teachers have the resources that they need to implement them? Do we have reading programs that are actually effective and evidence-based? That might be a good opportunity to say, well, maybe this isn't working for us. Maybe we need a different approach. But we can look at these data and we can interpret kind of where we might want to go when kind of looking at these. One thing to note as we're looking at making decisions is that the screeners are simply that. They are screeners. So, you wouldn't expect to go to, the doctor's office and get your blood pressure checked and they say, oh, he's got it. Oh man, we've got to take him to the ER immediately. Like, no, it's a screener. It just kind of takes a little temperature check to see how things are going. So using multiple sources of data is going to be really important when looking at screening data. We've also got here. This is a slide from schools kind of over time, and as you're looking at tier 1, you can look to see kind of how shifts are happening over time. That's really important to kind of help to ensure that your tier 1 practices are in place and sort of consistently in place. And you can tell sometimes there's fun little artifacts in your data, like fall of 20. There's a very big old spike in low risk ratings and on this rating, which makes sense because that was the fall where we're still, responding to COVID and all that. So that kind of makes sense there. There's a story that goes along with that. And David, correct me if I get this wrong, but there was a school that was implementing CI3T, and they're humming along year after year, and they're doing really good. They get to the 2008 time point, things are looking great, and then the following year they notice a little bump, and that was interesting for them because they're like, oh, this risk was kind of going down and down and down and down, and then it popped back up. Well, what happened? And they looked and kind of reviewed their practices and found that, oh, we didn't really do such a great job of onboarding new faculty this year. So maybe we should go back and take a look at that. So not only can these screening data help to see like how things are going in your school, but like, they may indicate potential challenges in other areas as well. So so looking at tier 1 is really important. And there's specific things that we can also do when looking at systematic screening as well. That would be to empower teachers with low intensity strategies. And this I kind of think of as like a nice kind of initial response when you're seeing screening data come in that suggests that there is a challenge at tier 1. What could we do to kind of, increase or ratchet up the intensity of our behavior supports slightly in order to meet students' needs? Helping to establish that really positive classroom environment is really important, in addition to like, making sure you've got routines in place, that you've got a nice physical, classroom arrangement that can help to kind of prevent behavior challenges from occurring. My story that I always tell my undergrads is that which highlights kind of the importance of physical room arrangements in a very, very small way, but that when students would line up to leave my classroom, they'd always grab my markers and always write on my whiteboard. And I have to go find them and I have to say, hey, what are you doing? Stop writing on my whiteboard. And, I just was thinking about it. That's just annoying. I don't want that to happen anymore. And then like a lightning bolt, it hit me. Oh, what if I move the markers to my desk? You just put them in a drawer, and wow, can you imagine? Suddenly, it wasn't an issue anymore. So that is just one little anecdote to highlight the importance of thinking ahead about classroom arrangements, using things like pre-correction, which is a low intensity behavior support strategy that will be coming up soon in our discussions. But when thinking about these different strategies like behavior-specific praise, instructional choice, active supervision, increasing opportunities to respond, you can help a school system kind of adopt these by having folks be sort of site level experts to support their colleagues with implementing these strategies. So you might have somebody that is sort of, maybe the behavior specific guy or the active supervision guy or instructional choice person that will be there to support staff in case they have questions or want to kind of implement some of these things. And, if you're looking to kind of introduce sort of a suite of low intensity strategies to support school environments, should data suggest that there's some challenges there, you could do like a book study where you take a book and you break down piece by piece. Let's talk about this strategy this month, this strategy next month. And by the end of the year, you've got teachers that are walking out with a whole set of new strategies in their toolkit that they can pull out like a Swiss Army knife and whatever they need to do when they're given school classroom context. So another thing that we want to think about in terms of also looking at low intensity strategies is using screening data in tandem with other data to make those decisions. Because like we said, it's just a screener. You don't want to send anybody to intensive care because of the blood pressure thing. So, when you're looking at a classroom of students, individual teachers should be empowered to be able to look and say, okay, how well are my students doing with reading and math? How is that level of risk going? You can look at that in tandem with behavioral risk. And perhaps a picture might begin to develop about kind of what specifically risk looks like for certain students. And you can look at other sources of data too, like how are kids with the ODRs coming across, and is absenteeism an issue? And I would say that's definitely something that we'll consider looking at, because if you want to do like a really high quality intervention with a student, they gotta be there to experience the benefits of that. So, if you don't consider all of the data you have at your disposal, you might miss something here or there. So again, kind of the idea is that you want to get a holistic picture and you want to use data to be efficient in your decision making. So to kind of help you to conceptualize and think about these things, we're going to ask you in a moment to kind of peruse some of our pages on our website. So if you're looking for things like a nice book for like a book study, you could check out some of our literature. These two books are really nice. So we have kind of you might call it a meme on our project that we refer to books by what is on the cover. So we've got you got the toolbox book right here. We also have a door book which has doors on it, but that's not here now. But these are two ones that are really nice, and I like the toolbox one because it's like it just has the list of strategies, and it's like what it is, why it's beneficial, how can you implement it, benefits, challenges, research. Like it just goes bam, bam, bam down the line. It's really easy to kind of pick up and run off with, which is what I would want my teachers to do: pick up and run off with useful tools. There's also, like, if you're interested in sort of either a practitioner or journal side of things, our team recently came out with open access articles, which are actually kind of shown right here, of these different low intensity strategies in different types of varied learning in contexts. So we're really proud of these. They're free open access. They're just there for anyone that want to kind of click and download. And so if you're looking for some resources that you can, mess around with today and to, download and look at, we've got you covered there too. On our professional learning, and let me just go back and let me just appreciate the graphic here. I just love that little, I love it. So on the professional learning page, you can click on that and you can scroll down to this section. I think it's at the bottom. It's called the Tiered Intervention Library. And it's just basically a bunch of little accordions that you can click and it kind of pops open, and you've got a whole bunch of different resources that are in there for you to kind of look at. There's a PowerPoint presentation, which you can click and download if you want to learn about, like, just give it to me in the PowerPoint and just kind of click through and see that. And then you can take that PowerPoint and bring it to your faculty and staff and say, hey, You want to learn about instructional choice? I got a PowerPoint for you. Click, 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 click. We talk about it. So these are there for you to kind of share and download and look at and peruse. But not only that, there's also like really nice resources that kind of go along with the PowerPoint. So like we talk a lot about the importance of treatment integrity and social validity. We want to be able to have an implementation checklist at our disposal so that we know whether things are in place or not. Treatment integrity to know that, you know, once we've implemented it, once we have the checklist to implement, is it in place? Social validity forms are at the ready to assess the degree to which stakeholders, students, adults feel that the intervention is appropriate, because that's, you know, really important in our work of supporting student behavior, that to make sure that things are fitting, that the context makes sense for students there. And so those are there for a litany of different resources there. On the responding to COVID-19 page, there are additional resources here that correspond to like these low intensity strategies in virtual and remote settings, which is kind of neat. So like if you were wanting guidance on like how to use like instructional choice within like a remote setting, if you have like teachers within your district that are like, they work with students in remote settings. Like I have a friend that works with students just online remotely. And so if you're looking for that type of support, that's there. There's also information for families as well. So if you're looking, if families are saying, hey, those are some great ideas, I'd like to kind of try some of that stuff at home, that those resources are there as well. I believe there is some of it's in Spanish, I believe, as well. So for some families that speak Spanish, that resources there as well. Yeah, these are all just sort of available for anyone that kind of wants to take a look and download. And so again, these fit really well into the classroom context, because within tiered systems, within the CI3T model, we do want to make sure that we focus on the I part of it too. The comprehensive we got down. Yeah, we're doing academics, we're doing behavior, we're doing social emotional development, but we also want to make sure that we are integrating all that into our daily instruction. So like David mentioned earlier, this integrated lesson plan, which is on the responding to COVID page, is a great way to kind of start thinking about that, and like, how do I tie in these different objectives, and how do I use low intensity strategies maybe to meet those needs? Maybe I'm using active supervision while students are working independently, and using instructional choice or instructional feedback or opportunities to respond while the instruction is going on. And of course, we're relying on some of your fellow faculty and staff members to help you to disseminate that useful information. So with that, we're going to take a moment, we're going to pause, and we're going to go back into our breakout rooms, and we're going to give you all a moment, just a space to kind of let that simmer a little bit, digest on that, and also to explore what's on our website, the professional learning page, some of the responding to COVID-19 page, checking out the tiered intervention library. We encourage you to go there, download things, click on stuff, and just kind of explore. And our coaches will be there to kind of share some helpful hints and answer any questions you might have. So, okay, let's go and jump into it. So we talked a bit before about, what are we doing to help, all students at Tier 1? How can we empower teachers with low intensity strategies to support students and ensure that we are having a robust experience for all students at Tier 1? But what we also want to consider, as I find my chat window, make sure that's good to go. What we also want to consider is, how are we using systematic screening to inform our additional intervention efforts at Tier 2 and Tier 3. As David mentioned earlier, within the CI3T model of prevention, we have plans sort of laid out for students to receive additive supports at Tier 2 and Tier 3. So students continue to experience the benefits of high quality Tier 1, and additional interventions are added on top of that in order to meet any needs that we might see from the data. So it looks a little something like this. You might think of Tier 1 as sort of the foundational piece, and Tier 2 basically sits on top of that. So you got to have a strong foundation at Tier 1 before you really begin to consider like the real efficacy of tier 2 and tier 3. So having that strong foundation is as important as in place. Not to say that, if as you're working on tier 1 that you can't connect kids to tier 2 and tier 3, because you most certainly can. But it is important to have that tier 1 piece in place, to serve as a foundation. And within CI3T, our tier 2 and tier 3 interventions are kind of similar tools and toolkits, kind of like the low intensity strategies, but they are with us in the form of intervention grids, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But tier 2 is going to be the place where teachers sort of begin the problem solving process of like, okay, we got a kiddo that's coming in hot. How are we going to support them? What kind of interventions can we bring in to kind of help meet their needs? So this would be the part where Kathleen would talk about CrossFit. The only thing I'm crossing is reaching over my lap to grab another potato chip. So this isn't really my thing, but you can just sort of think generally any sort of like fitness class or any sort of, maybe like I do like a yoga or like a spinning class or whatever. Not everyone's going to be at the same skill set, but there are supports in place for people to keep them in the room and to keep them engaged and to keep them working, and to keep them participating with everybody else. And that's kind of the general gist of our tier 2 and tier 3. We can bring these supports into our classrooms to give students an opportunity to receive supports and stay in inclusive settings, to receive the general education experience like everyone else. So, I should give myself some credit. I do some biking, but anyways. So, so our tier 2 interventions, okay, they might look something like this. This is an example of a tier 2 grid. And this is all about a tier 2 intervention called self-monitoring. And within CI3T, all of our interventions at tier 2 and tier 3 have sort of the same structure. So what we want to know is, what is it? What's the name of it? And what's the description of it? It's important to describe kind of what happens with whom and under what conditions to give folks an idea of like, yeah, this is the intervention. Here's like the process for how it happens. It's not like a person or like a place, because those aren't services. Those are people, and those are nouns. I guess service is a noun too, but those are like, objects or places, locations. Whereas a description is like, this is what something does. So it's not send that to the counselor. What was the counselor going to do with students? What type of strategies are going to be involved? And what's really important here is the school-wide data. Now, connecting it back to our conversation on screening, the screening data is going to help you to decide who could be potentially eligible to receive this additive support. What's really important for the school-wide data entry is that you're using data sources that you collect for all students, because that's the important thing about screening, is that every kid gets screened. If you're at a school and if you ain't receiving a paycheck, you're getting screened. Okay, that's gen ed, special ed, ELL, whatever your label, whatever. We want to be sure to taking the time to assess whether there's a level of behavioral risk for students. So these school-wide data have to come from sources that are available for all students. So all students should be available to receive tier 2 and tier 3 types of supports. So teachers can look at this information and then say, okay, how are we going to bring students in? Then there's information here about like, okay, well, once students are in the intervention, we've taught it to them and they're working on it, what data sources are we collecting along the way? We want to, of course, include progress monitoring towards whatever goal they're working on. If it's completion of a behavior contract or if it's a certain behavioral goal. We also want to collect that treatment integrity and social validity that we've talked about. Again, the social validity being the formal assessment of acceptability on behalf of both the student and the adults who will be implementing that strategy, because you want to make sure there's contextual fit. It's really important in our work in supporting behavior. And treatment integrity. You want to make sure that whatever strategies you're using are implemented as they're designed to be implemented. Part of the benefit of using evidence-based practices is that we have already determined based on research that those things are effective if they're done in X, Y, or Z way. By doing step 1 through 10, you can have the same results. So it's important that we check to make sure, did I do steps 1 through 10? And if I did, great. Another kind of piece of that too is that you also want to be sure that should you come to a situation where this tier 2 intervention isn't really working for this kid, you also want to be able to come to a point and say, I actually did this. Because a tier 2 intervention can work, or it could not work because the intervention is not great, or you just didn't do it right. So you want to be able to delineate that decision too, to say, I really did this, I did it well, but it just didn't work. That's okay. We can continue the problem solving process. And you also want to consider the exit criteria, as Kathleen would say. It's not like the Hotel California where you check in and then no one leaves. She says it better, but you get my point. Like if you want to connect students to tier 2 and tier 3 supports, you also want to make sure there's data or there's a decision point to say, okay, this kiddo doesn't really need the support anymore. They've kind of graduated out of it, for lack of a better term. So and it's a good idea to connect your exit criteria with your entry criteria, so that way you've got a nice sort of parallel between some objective data sources to say that whether things are successful or not. And it could be things like those behavior supports. It could be things like small group reading instruction, maybe with the self-monitoring process. So it could be like an academic type of tier 2 support. Like a repeating readings would be another good example of like an academic tier 2 support for a student to support developing reading fluency. But again, you're going to see the same components of the tier 2 supports, the name of it, what it is. How does one become eligible for this? What are we going to monitor as we implement the strategy? And how do we know that it's worked to such a degree that maybe we exit them from it, or if we need to maybe consider a different type of strategy? This is an example of like of a treatment integrity list for self-monitoring, or rather a student self-monitoring form here. And what's really cool about this is that you can also integrate things within like a PBI system. So you see at the bottom there, we've highlighted, that if you get 5 out of 6 of these parts of the self-monitoring form correct, then you receive a ticket for following the intervention. And if your ratings match your teacher's ratings, you get an additional ticket. So we're rewarding honesty and integrity when we're implementing these strategies as well. So really nice little bit there. Again, thinking about treatment integrity, making sure that we have sort of a step-by-step checklist for implementing these strategies and ensuring that everything is being implemented as they are designed to be. This is an example of one that is connected to the social skills improvement system, which is another type of screening support that has like lessons sort of built into it. So this is like a counselor-led small group based on those scores. And again, you'll see data that can be used to connect students to those resources. Another thing to think about too is some of those low intensity supports like active supervision or behavior specific praise. Those can also be used maybe with greater intensity or with greater individualization at tier 2. If that's something that you feel could be useful in a given situation, that can certainly be kind of brought in to support students with that as well. Read 180 is a great reading curriculum that is really beneficial to help students with reading comprehension from 4th grade on to kind of 12th grade. So it's a secondary thing. This is another example of like an additive type of resource. And again, who gets to have this additional support? Well, we've got our criteria that show what it is that we want to accomplish and who we want to bring in to connect with the support here. Even things like things that are very heavily on social emotional well-being, things like mentoring. If you have students that maybe could benefit from some mentoring from some older students, there might be a connection you can make here. And again, what's really nice about this is that it helps take a lot of the guesswork out of it. If a teacher has all these resources that are available, but they're like, maybe we'll give it to this kiddo, maybe we'll give it to this kiddo. It takes sort of the guesswork out of it to say, I'll just look at my data and see where student scores are at, and to see where connections can be made based on what we know of our inclusion criteria. Things like a targeted math instruction, another type of support that can be brought in at tier 2. So there's all these different ways that educators can respond, when we have those initial challenges. But we do need to come to a point where we need to bring in, bring in the big guns here, where we need to look at what we have in our repertoire of resources and supports that require the most individualization, the most intensity to meet these needs for our students. And that's where we're at tier 3. I want to emphasize that tier 3 is at the top of our triangle, but it is not special education. So some students in special education might receive tier 3 supports, but tier 3 does not equal special education, if that makes sense. Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, this is all moving along a continuum, what you might call a problem-solving model. We're looking at ways to try to support our students when we're seeing challenges happen. And it can kind of exist in parallel or in tandem with like a student assistance team, referral process. So, but it's not like an equivalent process. And so the quintessential kind of tier 3 support that I think about is the functional assessment-based intervention, or the FABI, as it is lovingly called. But this is all about developing a intervention tailored to meet the specific needs of a student that is based on the function of whatever challenging behavior that we're seeing. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this type of thinking and this type of behavioral programming. You'll notice that the school-wide entry criteria are a bit stricter here. So for behavior, we see that the entry criteria are either high on the SRSS externalizing or internalizing, no option for SRSSIE for moderate. We really want to reserve this type of support for kids that are really showing a very high level of risk. So that's done on purpose to make sure that we are, being efficient with the resources and time that we have. I mean, that would be something if every kiddo had a functional assessment and a BIP. Theoretically, I guess you could do that, but that would be a lot of work. So we want to make sure that we're being efficient with our time and the use. And part of progress monitoring at tier 3, might look something like taking an experimental approach to make sure that when we're implementing these practices, that we're ensuring that the work that we're doing is tied, we can demonstrate that the work that we're doing, the plans that we're implementing, are specifically tied to shifts in student behavior. And so if you're interested in diving deeper into FABI, you guessed it, we've got a page on our website for all this information here. So it's under the Functional Assessment-Based Interventions tab. And boy, howdy, we have a whole lot of implementation materials that are just here for you to look at, download, click through, explore. We got videos, step-by-step process. I think I'm in one of the videos of like a little baby Grant when he was just a little grad student, just fresh in the school, but see if you can find that one. But yeah, this is there for you to kind of look at, explore, and see what you like. Okay, so with that in mind, we're just going to give y'all a moment to sit with this, kind of let it percolate, think about what connections you can make, take some time to kind of explore some of the pages that we talked about, and then we will reconvene in 15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about exploring resources to support systematic screening. Now, David had kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier when he showed you this tab on our website. But if you go to our website, ca3d.org, and go to the page that says systematic screening, this is going to be again, another just wealth of resources about looking at screening. So there's a lot of really useful information there. A lot of the information is organized by like screening tool. So you can look at things like the SRSSIE and other types of screeners that are on there. But if you go down to that one specifically, there's some things that I want to highlight for you that are on that page that folks on our team have done just an amazing job of compiling and putting together for folks to look at. So the first thing that's on there, if you scroll down to that the installation resources section, there's a couple protocols there that you can look at. The first one is systematic screening protocol, setting up screening in your school or district. So if folks are interested in learning more about kind of how to like to do the initial, like, how do I set things up here? This would be the resource to go to. You can look at that and download it, and you're looking at things like make sure you've got different windows in place that are matching up to the recommendations of making sure that you've got the appropriate amount of time from the beginning of the school till when screening starts, in order to give teachers the opportunity to get to know students before they begin sort of the behavior screening. There's another protocol that's all about site level preparation. So like, when a school is ready to screen, what are the considerations for that? Like, what needs to get put in place? What needs to get set up in terms of how folks need to access the screeners in a way that's secure? How does that get compiled? What happens, when the wheels fall off and there's an issue? Who do we contact? Who do we call? So thinking about those different considerations are here in this protocol here as well. And there's also a really cool like kind of browser-based ebook that you can look at. I think it's also a PDF that you can download if you want. I kind of just reviewed it as a PDF, but it's a training manual for like a screening coordinator. So if like a district wants to adopt screening and they want to appoint somebody as like, the point person for the district to say, okay, your job is going to be in part to make sure that screening is done successfully in our district, because there's a lot of logistical and communication considerations for making sure that screening goes, smoothly throughout, a district of, hundreds, maybe thousands of students. So it's divided up into these sections about like, district and site level coordinators, and also kind of mirroring some of the conversations we have today about like how to use the data and how to connect it with other data sources, and kind of how are we maximizing the effectiveness. Because that's really the whole goal, right? Is that we want to screen, we want to make sure that we're getting good information, and we want to use it to make sure that we are being effective in our instruction. There's also information there on, like the cut scores, so folks can look at that. You can download the screener right there. You'll want to also take note that there are two little sheets in that Excel file. That one is elementary, one is middle and high. And that's important because the conditional formatting is set in the way that each of them are scored. So you want to make sure that's one of the big points of screening, is making sure that you're using the correct tool in the correct way. Some other things that we want to share with you that are surprisingly not actually on the ci3t.org website. They're on a different website, which we also highly recommend. This is pbis.org. Which is like the website for the PBIS like center that has been consistently funded for many years to support the dissemination of new learning and strategies for supporting students in a PBIS framework. And so here we have a number of different resources available as well. Things like that our team has developed and shared and submitted via the pbis.org. Things like a brief on considerations for selecting a behavior or a screening tool, how to interpret those data, what are some questions you want to consider, what should you think about when installing a universal behavior screening tool, the hows and whys of screening, frequently asked questions for families, and one for community members, because that's another really important component, is that when you set things up in a school or district, you also want to make sure that you're communicating with stakeholders to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the reason why it's effective. And here's how it's going to be beneficial for our school community. Because you want to make sure you're being transparent. And so this is a way that you can help to kind of guide those conversations. There's also different briefs on there about kind of summarizing some lessons learned from the field and other the kind of take-home messages that folks, as they've investigated these screeners, have learned and would like to share. Okay, so let's take a moment, let's wrap things up, and let's see what's coming up next. So we were here at screening, and we have just completed this training, and now we're looking ahead to what's coming up next. So the next Empower session is going to be on low intensity supports. Just as we kind of alluded to in our talk today, we're going to go deep into those and look at what those are, why they're effective, and how you can implement them in a school context. It's all part of looking at different components within tiered systems within the CI3T scope to see and ensuring that we're covering all of our bases and thinking about professional learning from a wide variety of perspectives. And part of the Empower series is helping to kind of build support strategies and build supports across the tiers and thinking about teacher delivered strategies. We'll be talking about active supervision. We'll be talking about opportunities to respond, and we'll be talking about pre-correction. So these are three really key low intensity strategies that educators can pick up, can run with, and can implement in their classrooms to increase engagement and minimize disruption. If you're interested in more opportunities, I coordinate a series of calls called the CI3T Trainers and Coaches Calls. That's available on our professional learning website. You can scroll down to the flyer or click the little registration button if you want to sign up to receive the emails on how to join those. As David mentioned earlier, it's just a little time to talk shop about CI3T issues within there, to talk to some professionals who are in the field implementing these things. We talk about considerations for like building the plan, because some folks are trainers. And we also talk about like how to implement the plan as well. So if you're interested in more sort of professional learning from us, kind of those bottom two rows are where you want to be looking at. So we're looking ahead to the next one, session 3. Feel free if you want to share this with other folks who might want to come by and share it with their networks. You're always welcome to share the flyer with folks and invite others to join us at these sessions. They're available to the public. You can direct them to our website as well under the professional learning tab, down to the Project Empower section where you can register. So here's what we covered today. And next time we'll be looking at those 3 low intensity strategies that we can use within CI3T. And so with that, we just want to say thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for the gift of your time. We really enjoy talking about, really important, effective ways to support students across academic, behavior, and social emotional development.